Hello, and welcome to Lead, Learn, Connect, where we explore the worlds of training and coaching. I'm your host, Alan Krieger, and on this show we talk about not just the how of helping others grow, but the behind-the-scenes work of building a successful business, overcoming challenges, and staying connected to what's really important. My guest today is Larisa Traga, a leadership trainer and motivational interviewing expert from Santa Barbara, California. She focuses on developing leaders and trains clinicians and first responders on crisis intervention, emotional intelligence, and motivational interviewing. Whether you're a new trainer, a seasoned facilitator, or just curious about what it takes to really thrive in this world, this episode is for you. Let's get started. Welcome, Larisa.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, Alan.
Well, I'm honored to have you as my guest. And you've got quite a bit of experience and work in a number of different areas. Motivational interviewing is one of the areas you talked about. You started it really working with clinicians. How does that play out in looking at leaders? What is motivational interviewing and how can it help leaders be effective?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in terms of what it is, it's a communication style that really focuses on empowerment, working with people in a way that helps them feel seen and heard, and the way that it translates into leadership in organizations. As you know, right, relationship is at the kind of heart of good leadership, right? So being able to help engage, retain employees, building trust, helping empower people to grow and succeed. And also, there's a really big piece of it that has to do with helping people change and grow and resolve any ambivalence they might have about making positive changes in their lives. And so that is where I see that kind of intercross between this modality in bringing it into leadership training.
Talk a little bit for people who aren't familiar with what exactly is motivational interviewing as opposed to just talking to somebody.
Yeah. So there's a number of principles within motivational interviewing, starting with what we call the spirit of MI. And what it encompasses is working with people in partnership, having acceptance, unconditional positive regard for them, showing up with compassion and empowerment. And then there are some specific skills that we teach within that help you with kind of like what you would know as soft skills, being able to use open questions, affirmations, reflections, summaries, and then there's more.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing that kind of soft skills training, leadership training for many years. And it sounds like you're pushing the envelope on some of the things I did, taking it even more relational, more attentive, more employee centered. One of the problems I've run into with leaders is that they don't have time for this and they don't really see relationships. I'm a nice guy. I treat them well, but they got to do their work and all this conversation I don't have time for. How do you approach that with leaders?
Yeah. In MI, that's a common thing that clinicians say too, is like, I don't have time to learn another technique and do this. And I actually use an example of a study that was done where they looked at, individuals who come into the emergency room and they get 5 minutes of a motivational interviewing intervention versus not. And the individuals who got 5 minutes of MI while under the influence and coming in due to injuries that they received from their substance use disorder, right, ended up being more likely to reduce or stop their substance use than those who just got the general ER kind of intervention. So my take on it is that if you are really wanting to engage your employees, reduce their burnout, and have increased productivity, you don't have time not to do motivational interviewing.
Okay, I like that answer.
Mm,
It's a hard sell sometimes, but it's you stick to your principles, so that's good.
that's right.
So a lot of leaders get promoted without any training, and they were really good at their job, and boom, now they're a leader. So what's one thing, if you had to highlight that maybe it's not so obvious that leaders need to learn to be effective?
Yeah. You know what? It goes back to what we've been talking about, right? That leadership comes from being able to show up with empathy and accountability as opposed to what most people think it is, which is, to be directive or hierarchical, expecting compliance, right? And what they find probably fairly quickly is that in the work that we are in, the mission driven type of work, right, where resources are tight, teams are stretched, it's not about your title. It's about the influence that you have through building trust and relationships as opposed to exercising your formal power. And I think that's a point that some people miss. They fall back on that thinking that it's going to get them far, and it tends to backfire.
Okay, yeah, I'm on board with that. It's a sometimes again a hard sell.
Mhm.
You said leaders need to be accountable. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so one of the models that I use is called MI Lead, and it was developed by Jason Wilcox and a number of his colleagues. And what they talk about is this idea of influence, and that the way that we influence is by in combining showing up with empathy and then also having clear expectations and clear communication, and holding people basically accountable for the expectations and the structure that you put in place. And that is where influence comes. It's this kind of balance between empathy and accountability.
Okay, so the empathy is in my opinion, the harder sell for leaders. Accountability is what they want to hear. So you're giving them some of each. So that's a good combination.
That's right. And it's actually at the heart of being even a motivational parent, which is another training that I'm doing now as well, which is to be a good parent. It takes that uh, two of those things to show up with empathy and then being able to have structure and accountability. And that those are the types of homes where children thrive.
Hmm.
And what's an organization, right? It's just a different form of a family.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Great. How about in terms of communication? You mentioned communication styles a little while ago. What would you say is the biggest challenge leaders have in communicating effectively?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, there's a number of them, but some of the ones that come to mind right now is that, this idea of communicating with clarity and consistency. Um, there's a lot of times where leaders assume that they have said enough, communicated enough when they haven't. Um, there's also some of the other challenges I see is there's this inability to uh, listening with intent, where it's like I hear you, but not actually taking the feedback and the maybe dissent that people have and actually addressing the issues that employees and staff tend to bring. And then I would say also navigating difficult conversations. So how to give feedback, how to uh, go through the process of, let's say, even progressive discipline, right? And how to do it in a way that's not soul crushing, but is actually empowering.
Okay, so I have to ask you, how do you do that?
Oh my gosh, we have this amazing strategy in motivational interviewing, which is to first begin by asking people about their perspective on the issue at hand, right? We also talk about Brené's Brown, being clear, right? Clear is kind. Um, and then there are some specific steps in that we teach in our training around how to show up with empathy, how to be clear, um, and then how to engage the staff in being part of the solution, right? Um, and then developing a plan together as opposed to directing a plan to them.
Okay, so empathy and accountability again, both
That's right.
lining up.
Empathy and accountability. Yeah.
Okay. And if you had a leader who was working with a team that's having a lot of stress and burnout, which is pretty common these days, how would you advise them, other than what you've already shared of listening more, being a little more engaged,
Hmm.
being a little more clear? What else can they do to help a team? They can't lighten the workload. There's a lot of work to be done, and people are burning out. So what
Hmm.
do they do?
Yeah. Well, so the in within the kind of the framework of motivational interviewing, the way that I would approach this type of a leader is to again see them as the expert on their team, and eliciting from them a few things, but starting with, like, why did they become a leader, right? What's their why? What's their purpose? What attracted them to it, right? So help them kind of connect to their why, their passion about it, and then through that empowerment of the leader, get to what ideas they have, right, for how they can reduce staff burnout and improve morale. And this is kind of what MI is all about. It's not about giving, it's about uh, drawing it from them, drawing it out from them, because they are the expert on their team.
Mhm.
They've been there, right? And I'm just there to help guide them in this process, right? Um, and then through coaching and consultation, encouraging them, right, to show up with integrity, honesty, being transparent, right, um, looking to celebrate successes, helping with prioritization, right, teaching staff how to delegate, when to say no, right? Things of that nature. But it would be a conversation and a drawing out of them, as opposed to, here's what you should do and how to do it, go do it.
So kind of draw out from them their ideas, but then fill in things that they may not like, suggesting how to help someone prioritize if they're not good at that. So filling
Yes,
in the gaps, but first draw out what you can from them.
exactly. We use the acronym in motivational interviewing called ask, offer, ask. So first you ask, then you offer, and then you follow up with, what are your thoughts on this? How might you implement this? And,
Mhm.
what might work in your team?
I guess I'm a little bit of a cynic. So as you were talking about, what's your mission? Why did you become a leader? One of the answers that you hope not to get, but I've gotten, is it's a promotion. I wanted the more money. I don't really want to be a leader. I don't like it. So
Uh-huh.
what do you do with that?
Well, so using motivational interviewing, I would reflect that. And I would say, so you became a leader because it was an opportunity for you. And there's nothing about leadership that you find attractive. So this
Okay.
is
And
called an amplified reflection, right?
chances
But
are they would say, well, yeah, there is something I like. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Oh, I
So
like this motivational interviewing. It makes the job of a coach or a trainer much easier because you don't have to do as much of an offer. It's more of the ask and pull out. And most people who have some expertise, that's how they got to be a leader, have knowledge and ideas as well. So,
exactly. And, it's about also finding out, now that they are a leader, what do they want to be able to do with that position, right? So yes, it was a promotion, so there was this extrinsic motivation that brought you to it, but now that you're here, what do you want to do with it, right? What can you do with it, and what skills do you need in order to be successful as a leader, and how can we help you get the skills that you need to feel more empowered and confident in your ability to show up with integrity.
Okay, great. Well, let's shift a little bit. I'll try a little motivational interviewing. So tell me about yourself. How did you get to where you are now? You're independent, right? Working on your own.
Yes, I
Um,
am.
what
Yeah.
was your career trajectory that brought you here, and what was your motivation?
All I wanted to do was become a school social worker. So I'm still reflecting on how I ended up where I am. But life has a way of, having twists and turns that took me into the field of substance use treatment, which is where I really honed in on motivational interviewing, and then trauma work, which is where I honed in on EMDR, which is a type of trauma therapy. And through my own personal experiences with some really good leaders, but then also some really ineffective leaders, I became inspired and passionate about um, just kind of dipping my toes and trying to make an imprint of some sort in the leadership world and improving work culture through some of the trainings that I do.
So the good leaders kind of inspired you to what leadership could be like, and the bad leaders inspired you to help improve the profession.
Yes, yeah, because I've had the gift of having both and being able to learn, the things that really made a good leader, right? An effective leader. People who, see you and hear you, right? Who respect you as a human being as opposed to seeing you as a means to an end, right? Who support you to grow, and then those that see you as a means to an end and don't appreciate you and demean you and abuse you, right? And just unbelievable. So, yeah, that's why I'm here.
And talking about those bad leaders for a moment, um, what's your experience been? My sense is that most people don't wake up and want to be a bad leader, but they get there because they just don't have the skills. They're under pressure and they revert to the limited strategy they have.
Hmm.
And sometimes they build up a wall and they don't want to hear from you. So how do you approach someone who's clearly failing as a leader, maybe not that open to change, but their boss or somebody says they need to change, and you've been asked to get them to change the way they lead?
Yeah. Well, so I'm thinking about the first part of your question, which is kind of how does that happen, right? Um, and it's a combination of factors, but I think the at the root of it is that individuals who make ineffective leaders or managers or supervisors are really lacking in the principles and kind of components of emotional intelligence. They don't have the so Daniel Goleman, you and I spoke
Mm-hmm.
about
Yeah.
before, right? So he talks about emotional intelligence, and he has a book on primal leadership where he talks about what does it take to be an effective leader, right? And the aspects that he really reflects on is first and foremost self-awareness. Do you have the ability to see your strengths and your shortcomings? And I find that bad leaders don't have that,
Yeah.
right? They don't have another aspect is self-regulation. Are they able to manage their emotional, right, and how their emotional world? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I would say at the heart of bad leadership is just really um, low emotional intelligence skills. And so I guess the way that I would work with that is to teach them about that, right? And bring it, make it personal for them. Talk to them about favorite leaders they've had and what made them good, right? So these are some of the things that we do in the trainings that I do, where we just really break it down to, okay, what does it mean to be a good leader? And then connecting them to that, and then helping them with, hey, here's some things you may not have thought about, but some things that could help you be a leader. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's
No, that's good. Yeah. So you start with where they're at, what's a good leader, and then kind of help them see where maybe they're missing some pieces or maybe even wrong, that the way they're doing it. So it's a very gentle approach to leading them to where hopefully they can have a better, more emotionally intelligent view of leadership. Yeah.
yes,
No, I think
yes.
that was very helpful.
And it's more of
So,
a guiding, right? You're
mhm.
guiding them, and then they get to decide where they want to begin, how much they want to do it. And as you know, some may not decide to do anything about it, right? Some may just blow it all off and say, I don't want to do this because this is not a priority to me or important to me, which, makes me feel bad for the people that they're leading.
Mhm. Yeah, the old expression, you can lead a horse to water, you can't always make it
Yeah,
drink.
that's right.
And it sounds like your approach is as good as it can be to get a resistant person to buy in. But yeah, I've gone into training where people come into the room like this, and it's like, oh
Yes,
my God,
yes.
we
And
have a we have a job ahead of us here.
we talk about the nonverbal cues and what what are you communicating just nonverbally, because so much of how we communicate is nonverbal,
Hmm.
right? So we talk about that. Um, yeah, so there's a lot, and I would say, you know, motivational interviewing has been studied for decades now. It's in over 75 languages, and one of the thing at the root of its effectiveness is what you said, which is helping people uh, resolve their ambivalence or stuckness that's preventing them from making the changes that are in their best interest. And it's the only approach that I know of that has been studied as much as this approach has been in effective change making.
Well, thank you, Larissa. Believe it or not, we're about out of time. I think that's a great place to leave it with a great insight as to um, the value of motivational interviewing and how it can help overcome some of the big hurdles that a lot of trainers face in their work. So
Absolutely.
that's it for today's episode of Lead, Learn, and Connect. A huge thank you to Larisa Traga for sharing some great insights into her approach for training. And if you found this helpful, be sure to subscribe, share it with a colleague, and leave a review. You can find out more about Larissa's work and additional resources in the show notes. And if you're ready to strengthen how you communicate, click in the show notes to our website to learn more about the T.E.A.M model of communication. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and other social media. Until next time, keep leading with intention, keep learning, and keep connecting. Thanks for listening.